Mostly in Hail Mary plays, you think, well, the odds, But, I thought, oh, they could lose it, and they did. So.
Yeah, and the funny thing was is that the defensive ends, all they really keep Aaron Rodgers. We have a really bad echo. The only thing they really had to do is put Aaron Rodgers in the pocket.
Yeah. No, and I think if you're going to be a fan and get on the Lions, the three-person rush, I have never liked that, no matter what team I've been watching. When you start to play differently than you play usually, you set yourself up. Like the prevent defense, in my mind, you have to make adjustments, but I don't know that I would roll into a prevent, and I wouldn't rush three people for sure. If anything, I might blitz, put some pressure on them.
And you're right. Blitz. It makes it much harder to throw, especially if you got someone in your face.
Yeah, and it's not as if the other reason why I would have considered a blitz at the time is it's not as if the Lions are in the hunt. So go for broke in my mind. They were 1-7. Even if they won out, they were going to go 9-7, but that wasn't likely. So in my mind, you go for broke, and go for broke in that situation is, you rush four guys and perhaps you bring a linebacker, off the edge or in the gap. So it was an incredible game, though. I mean, so, it was certainly an interesting game. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up as GM and coach of the Lions next season, because it certainly will not be Caldwell.
I think New York Giants fans are going the same way with Tom Coughlin.
Yeah, it's interesting though. There's some parallels. One of my favorite Facebook posts this year was from a friend of mine named Buddy Morehouse, who was a former journalist who has gone straight and went into another profession. But he put in. He said, "Can't we just figure out a way for Harbaugh to coach Michigan on Saturday and the Lions on Sunday?" And I thought that was pretty funny, because I think the Lion fans would love to have a Harbaugh type coach. But the parallels between there is a parallel between Caldwell, the Lions, and Brady Hoke of Michigan, and that is, I think Brady Hoke was an incredibly nice man who just could not match the sophistication of coaching that he was up against. And Caldwell seems to be in the same position. Like I have the sense that the players really appreciate what an honorable man he is and what a wonderful human being. And I sense he just is a good guy. He has sort of a Tony Dungy style approach. He treats everyone with great respect. But we haven't seen a level of sophistication from the Lions offense or defense that seems to measure up with the other teams in the league.
The two things. People are focusing on going forward instead of the field goal. Like, the field goal is not a guarantee, right? Everybody acts like it's a guarantee. So you can cut him a little slack, not a lot, but a little there. But he challenged a play where the best case scenario was he was going to gain 2 more yards in his favor and not the ball. And I couldn't understand why he was wasting a challenge on that. And that, to me, shows he's off his game. That was the worst call I think I've seen in a while, because it just made no sense. If you're really thinking of this game as a battle of field position, then you don't know these two teams, because neither of them do that very well.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. So, it certainly will be interesting to see, what happens there. But if you're a Lions fan, the frustration, we've talked about this before. I love the excitement in Toronto and the knowledgeable Toronto fans who know and understand and appreciate and are glad that they're rebuilding. But in Detroit, even though they know the game here, they can't have any of those feelings, because this is like the 6th rebuild, in the last, 15 years. So the new guy comes in, he's starting over again. Unless he comes in and says, well, I think Stafford's the guy still, but
Well, this is an Edmonton Oilers situation. It's in a way. I mean, they've had so many top picks, and like Edmonton, what is it, 4 and 6 years? I mean, in a way, the last thing that the Oilers want is Austin Matthews. They've had enough of these top picks. They just want to start winning.
Although since we kind of talked about this last week, I found it interesting. They've played pretty well.
Yeah. Well, let's do the intro and then we'll talk about that.
Where's Zach today?
Eck got called away at the last minute, so it's just the three of us. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, December 7th, 2015.
I'm Russ Cohen, and I have a new book coming out soon. It's coming.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports, and I'm remembering Pearl Harbor today, as we all should.
Yes, we should.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzCast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Kevin, because I had a Twitter discussion with somebody this morning and said that if you want to watch a movie about Pearl Harbor, do not watch the movie Pearl Harbor, because that thing is an utter piece of trash, and the only good thing to see in that movie is Kate Beckinsale. If you're going to watch a movie about Pearl Harbor, a movie from 1970 called Tora, 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 which is...
That's a great movie.
Incredible. And it's half in Japanese,
yes,
which will turn some people off, but there's subtitles, and half American. And it's a great movie, and it's very, very accurate in terms of the history of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's a fantastic movie. And if you want to read a book, there's a book called At Dawn We Slept by Gordon Prang. That's a great book. But, it's 74 years, and next year will be the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor that launched the U.S. into World War II, and we should remember all the soldiers who passed away at that attack, which was probably happening about now. I think 1 p.m. Eastern Time 74 years ago. Let's start off with something that just popped up on the news just before 1 p.m. in that the Montreal Canadiens have waived Alex Semin. Now, it was a roll of the dice by Marc Bergevin, probably a very good roll of the dice. A talented player who didn't work out in Carolina I think he was a $7 million contract for. I think they bought off the last 4 or 5 years of that deal. And Montreal signed him for $1.1 million. Just did not work, and now they placed him on waivers. Kevin, I don't see anybody claiming him. Do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess my first impulse is to say no, but there are so many teams looking for offense, and the problem is I think, as you said, I thought that was a terrific move by Bergevin because of his history, but the fact that he has not been able to produce there, given the circumstances, because he's with a quality team, obviously, and there's an opportunity to prove himself yet again, given yet another chance, and he wasn't able to do it. It makes you wonder that, okay, well, maybe this is just who Semin is. We always want to cast him as a guy who, kind of underachieves, but, maybe he's not. Maybe he overachieved when he scored those goals in Washington.
He may have. I mean, he had 4 points. And it's interesting because I brought up Paul Byron's name a couple weeks ago, and he's a guy that never really got a chance in Calgary. He's sticking in Montreal, and Semin's leaving. He's got 1 more point, but he's obviously a better player, plays on the 4th line as a role. Nowadays, it's for a guy like Semin, the one-dimensional offensive player, it's hard to stay a one-dimensional. And if you're not producing offense, they don't want you. There's nothing you can do.
That's right. So I guess we'd have to look at the bottom of the standings, but I would say right now, doesn't it feel like the KHL is still the best place for Semin?
Yes.
And probably that's where eventually he will end up, if not now, then but next season.
Well, I mean, I know that Montreal called up a number of different AHL forwards over the last couple of weeks. Bud Holloway, Daniel Carr was the last one they called up. Sven Andrighetto.
And actually, Carr. We should mention Carr scored a goal in his first game.
Yeah. So I mean, it might be a case of they think that they can get away with playing one of those players on one of the bottom lines until the trade deadline, until Bergevin can go out and maybe add a couple of veteran bodies. But, Russ, I think it's a commentary that, obviously Carolina is not going to put a claim in for him after what happened. But, he was fairly successful in Washington. But they were a team that signed him to a series of 1-year contracts. They would never give him the long-term deal. And I don't think there's a chance in hell, especially with Barry Trotz there, that he's going to go back to Washington.
No, there's just too many teams now that want players to play two-way hockey, some sort of two-way hockey. He doesn't do it. And that's the biggest thing. If he at least had some other tools in the toolbox, he'd still be there. But the only reason you hire Semin is to get points, and if you don't get them, you don't want them.
Yeah. Kevin, the other, I mean, it wasn't exactly a big news on the weekend, but the Blackhawks waived Victor Tikhonov, and he was claimed by Arizona, who drafted him, I think it was 6 years ago, 2008 or 2008. Now he didn't score any points for the Blackhawks, but from what I understand, he was sort of important to bring over because he had played with Panarin, and sort of almost like his his buddy, somebody who could translate for him, and now now he's off to Arizona. I mean, Tikhonov, he played in the NHL before. He played well enough with Arizona that they liked to bring him back, but I mean, and Chicago brings up Brian Bickle. I'm a little surprised that Bickle was actually back in the NHL, but he made his presence felt this weekend.
Yeah, well, it's first let's address Tikhonov. Like, Tikhonov's a really good guy, number one, and I think that's why he's being brought back to Arizona. I think to me he's always been, and we'll let Russ address it too. To me, I always see him as a second, third line guy. Like, he's not a premium scorer. He has some offensive ability that allows him to, play in the top six at times, and he's been good enough to be on Russian national teams. But he's not a dominant player. We're used to players coming over from Russia and to be real easy fits in the top six, because the guys who come over are usually a highly skilled player. Tikhonov's really not that guy. He can play an offensive game, but he's just not dominant. So I think this will be good for Carolina. He's a veteran guy who's been for Arizona. He's a veteran guy that knows how the game is played, and I think will fit in pretty well with Dave Tippett. So I thought it was a good pickup. And with regard to Bickle, I said this last summer, and it's still true. Like, they actually need a guy like Bickle. The Blackhawks do. The problem is he just makes too much money. Like if he was a $2.4 million player, you'd be thrilled with him. Absolutely thrilled, because he gives you a physical presence, a goal here and there. It's good for the playoffs and that kind of thing. But the problem is he's not getting paid just over $2 million. It's just too much money.
Is there ever a day, and I know this is a ridiculous thing to say, but is there ever a day where a player should say, no, don't sign me to that deal, and he's not going to say it to the GM, but to himself, I can't sign this deal because I may become one of those guys quickly, even though I'm going to get the pot at the end of the rainbow. I mean, that's the problem with this now, Kev, is you're right. There are guys now that have priced themselves out. Andrew McDonald's been in the AHL almost all year. He got paid, but he doesn't get to play anymore.
No, and a lot of guys know when they sign the contract that they're setting themselves up for failure. I remember the best example was Marty LaPointe, who basically told the Detroit media in his own way that he knew it was a mistake to sign the $5 million a year to go to Boston, because he knew what his role is, he knew what he was good at, and he knew the Bruins were bringing him in, I think, to do something that he was not probably capable of doing, which was to be a frontline scorer. And he could score goals, but not score at the rate that is expected from a $5 million a year player. And I think there have been several players who have signed contracts who knew when they signed that contract that they were setting themselves up for potential failure.
In the news, the NHL 3 stars were announced just around noon, and John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks, Russ, was named the first star of the week, had a couple shutouts. Shea Weber was the second star. He had a hat trick, I believe, against the Detroit Red Wings on the weekend, and Mike Camilleri, I believe, had 7 points on the week for the Devils. Let's start with Camilleri. I'm continuing to be surprised by the Devils. I believe they have 29 points right now. I'm surprised that they're scoring at the level that they are, and that they're position to, either be close to a playoff spot or actually get a wild card in the Metro. I personally think that the wild card is going to come for the Atlantic, but it's possible that the Devils are going to get in there because Corey Schneider is playing great in goal, and they're getting a career year out of Camilleri.
Yeah, I mean, defense is good enough, and it'll get better over time. Schneider's one of the best, and that definitely has given these forwards, with a new coach, the confidence or overconfidence to perform like this. Camilleri was certainly okay last year, but he wasn't like back to his old self. Now he looks like he's back to his old self. So it's an amazing thing. I mean, that was a great signing for them, and it continues to be. And we'll see. I mean, so far they're hanging in there. So I can't disparage them and say, oh, well, they're going to drop out, whatever, because I've seen enough of the sample size now where you have to at least look at it and say they might hang in there.
Yeah, it's interesting, but our business now is to microwave analysis, and I remember when Lamoriello signed Camilleri, the instant analysis was, this is not a great signing, and at some point the wheels are going to fall off, and he's not going to be able to perform. But thus far, it's been a great signing.
Yep.
Like as you mentioned, he played well last season, and this season he's even better. And for a team that struggles to score goals and is not a prolific team, that turned out to be exactly what they needed. They needed a guy they could turn to get a big goal, and he can do that. So, and the other element I would add to, Russ's excellent analysis of it is that Hines has made a difference as well. Like he really has brought a system there that kind of sort of fit the New Jersey tradition, but also it sort of opened it up a little bit for the forward. So, there's already been early talk that he should be one of the favorites for the Adams if they continue to play and continue to push for a playoff spot.
Now, I can run out of superlatives to discuss Shea Weber, so I won't bore everybody with that. But
let's talk about that, Mike, because he is, to me, at the heart, at the argument of the relevancy of advanced stats. And to be honest with you, I do not know where his advanced stats are. I haven't looked at them lately this season.
No, but last year he got picked apart, and everybody's like, Yossi's better. And yada, yada.
Last year, for a few years, that that advanced stat people can prove to you that through statistics that the Predators play better when he's not on the ice. Now, my eye test says that's ridiculous.
Right.
And Peter Laviolette, I had a conversation with him. It was one of my favorite quotes of the year. Is he and I were sitting there talking about it, and I'm kind of laughing as I'm asking him the question, and he looks at me and he goes, "Well, all I can tell you is when we're holding a lead with 2 minutes to go or a minute to go, and I look at my bench, Shea Weber's the first guy I put out there. You know what I mean? Like I don't care what his stats are, but." It's just one of those things. I saw the goals he had. Big shots. Like how many shots are there left in the National Hockey League that just can zip by a goalie? I mean, Ovechkin still has one. Shea Weber. I mean, everybody shoots the puck hard, but
Right.
there's something about Weber's shot that you whiff on it when you're a goalie. He's still one of the most intimidating defensemen in my mind. When you come over the line, you got to look to see where Shea Weber is. It's that simple.
And a defenseman hat trick is rare.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. So I'm very bullish on Shea Weber. If I had to compare him to Doughty, I'd probably take Doughty, but Weber would certainly be in my list of the top 5 or 6 defensemen in the league today.
yeah, he's to me he's like Al McGinnis's slap shot with the defensive ability of Rod Langway. I think he's that good of a two-way defenseman. But my question is, and we've brought this up, and Eck and I have debated this for a couple years. I think the Preds are in a position to challenge to make a run this year with Rene. I mean, Rene's healthy. With the defenseman that they have before Seth Jones signs his another long-term extension, they've got their other defenseman locked up. Weber's under contract. What I think they need is that one big forward. Maybe they trade for Eric Stahl at the deadline, something of that nature. But when they sign Jones, when they maybe have to pay money for a big four when they have to sign Forsberg. Is it there in David Poyle's mind this is the time that maybe I have to move Shea Weber a year or two before he starts to decline while he's worth the money that he's making right now?
Well, that is a fair question, Mike, because I was just on Nashville radio a week ago, and that question came up. It wasn't specifically about Weber, but what it was about is it time for the Predators consider moving one of their defensemen to get the flag carrier style of forward that they need? And I said the answer to that is yes. I'm not sure that it's Weber, but I think what you bring a lot of logic to the table with what you're saying about Weber. We're reaching the point where the declining years are just ahead. It's going to happen prior to his contract running out. It's just inevitable. So it is a decision to be made because your first impulse is, okay, they'd be better off trading a guy like Ekholm, a player I like a lot, or Ryan Ellis. But you're not going to get a lot for Ryan Ellis, and though you will get more from Ekholm, it may not be enough to bring in a flag carrier style of forward, the guy that you can look to get the big goal. You could do that with Shea Weber. If you went to the Edmonton Oilers and said, well, it's time to talk, and they're sitting there with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Eberle and Taylor Hall and all the guys they have there, that's a great fit. And that could be the style of trade that, and I know this is a cliche, but I think it's true, is the type of trade that could benefit both teams if you could do that. So I think there's logic to that. Do I think they'll do that? No. But I do think they will, at some point, because the other element here, too, and it never gets talked about a lot, and I'd love Russ to address this because I know he knows so much about the scouting community, but the Predators have a knack of finding hidden gems on defense. They have the ability to identify defensemen with more potential than others seem to do. So with all that wrapped in, it does make some sense for them to move a defenseman.
We've asked them that. They admit to nothing. They claim it's luck. Like, they just won't give out what their secret is. They won't, but it's definitely there. I wouldn't trade Weber because I think when you are in these big games, if a team isn't facing Shea Weber, I think there's a certain sigh of relief. Hey, I'm not going to get pounded by Weber. The goalie's sort of happy that Weber's not in there. I think that would be the worst thing for the Predators, even though I get the value part. They can't trade for another rental either, Mike. That doesn't work for Nashville. They've done it. It's failed miserably every time they've done it. Trading for an offensive rental has never worked. If they're going to get an offensive player, it's going to have to be a young offensive player, and it's going to have to be for one of their really good young defenders. I think that's really the way it's going to have to go. And by young, I don't mean 22, but I mean 27, 28.
Right. You mean Ekholm or Ellis? You mean Ekholm or Ellis? Somebody like that.
And to get something like that in return, because anytime they got Forsberg or anything else, all of that stuff had been fleeting for them. David Poyle needs to stray away from that.
Yeah, because it'll be. Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was just going to say the other argument against trading Weber is simply this: if you trade Weber, who are the Predators? What is their identity? Their identity right now is Shea Weber, and they have a lot of good players, but they don't have a lot of great players, except Seth Jones is great, or is going to be great, and probably I would say Roman Josi is in that category as well. But up front they have a bunch of good players, but no great players.
Well, and my point is that I think that the Preds are on a limited window in terms of having a chance to win a cup with Rene. I think Rene's 33. Weber's not over the hill by any stretch. I think he's 30. So he's got good years left. And they have cap room. If their ownership would maybe go outside the budget a little bit for one, that's why I was thinking more a rental, because if it's a guy who's a young guy, they're probably going to have to pay him if he's because I don't conceive of another team trading a young player with a lot of offensive upside unless he's coming up on an RFA contract and they're going to have to pay him. That's why I think it's probably they can get a rental, a guy like a Stahl for a draft pick.
But nobody fits into that system as a rental. That's the problem.
Well, although Ross, I'm with Mike on this. To be honest, I may be drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but I keep thinking Eric Stahl as well. I mean, you're not you bring him in knowing it's not a long-term deal. You're not going to sign him long-term probably, but it would depend on the price. I mean, I wouldn't give up. I'd give up a first-round pick and maybe a couple of prospects, but not my top prospects. And then you bring him in because I think he could help their offense on the short. They don't need much help. Like, their defense is among the best in the league. They've got Rene. Their offense is okay. It's just not exceptional. And bringing in one more guy, they don't really have a number one center.
Right.
No, they don't, but I don't even think they could afford to trade a first rounder anymore either. They are not as deep as they used to be. No. And I think that's starting to sort of be a problem too with the lack of offense. I think that's these are issues now that they've done that a few times before and it didn't work. Not to say you should always stop, but I don't think you could trade a first rounder anymore.
Well, the other element to consider is, are they going to be able to get Vesey? If they feel if they feel that way, then I think you could afford to go first.
Here's what we were told on our show 2 weeks ago. They were told that Vesey still wants to play for them. Now, we've heard that before, and guys still leave, and they go somewhere else and they don't sign, but they have every belief that he is going to sign. But the thing is, Kev, if he doesn't, that would start a bad spiral for them. There's no question. They really need this guy.
And Kevin, I'm putting my Maple Leafs hat on here because what I've been theorizing is that if it comes up upon the deadline, at that point we're not going to know whether Vesey is going to stay or go, sign with them or go free agent because it'll still be during the NCAA season. But if there's an opportunity and they don't have a good feel about what he's going to do, and the Maple Leafs are out there in terms of having players that they are willing to move who are quality players, there's a possibility there that Toronto could trade them someone like a Tyler Bozak or a Nazem Kadri, somebody who could help them on a playoff run, or a guy like Vesey who might be going to Toronto anyway if we believe the rumors that are out there.
Well, that would be the honorable thing to do. Like, if this is a done deal, and then it would be the honorable thing to do is to do that. But
it's not. So I have to go with what Nashville says right now. I think the difference.
I don't think Nashville has any idea.
Right.
I think that what
they know what they've been told. I mean, that's all they can go by.
Right. Exactly. So.
Right, and like we talked on a previous webcast, Russ, I'm pretty sure that Anaheim was told by Justin Schultz before he decided to go free agent that he was interested. I mean, right now there's the place where the decision can be made is not there. So at this point, he can say anything he wants.
Sure. I mean, I got something to bring up. I saw an interesting thing that's happened over the weekend, and this goes back to the original article I did maybe, this is probably like 6 years ago when Melrose was the coach of Tampa and he was not playing Steve Stamkos enough. Well, now Jim Rutherford is getting on Mike Johnston's case for not playing Daniel Sprong enough because and there is financial implications. He needs to know before 40 games, before he starts moving into other contract territory, whether he's worth it to keep up there or not, and the coach isn't playing him. So now Mike Johnston's job, even though he's got a winning record, very tenuous ground, I think.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Going back to that, and I've told this story before, but it always bears repeating because I believe it was Rick Tocchet. Who followed Melrose? Was it Tocchet?
Right. Okay. I think it was Tocchet, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But the way Tocchet treated Stamkos should have been the model for everyone treating younger players, and that is, if you remember, he would play 4 or 5 games. He would give him 1 game out to watch the game up in the press box. Then he would have to sort of report to an assistant coach. And when he wasn't playing, he spent all of his time in the weight room. I remember talking to Stamkos about it, and because of the way they did things, he gained like 10 or 12 pounds of muscle. He wasn't overly taxed because he got days off. And to me, it's exactly the same as the way you treat like apprentices in all other businesses. A young lawyer who joins a law firm does not go in and start immediately litigating big time cases. You got to sort of ease your way in, and if you're working for a big 8 accounting firm, it's the same thing. You have to sort of ease in, but we don't do that with young players. We just throw them into the fire and say, sink or swim, and earn your keep. And then if they don't perform, then we push them up into the press box. Where like if they would have handled Sprong the way that I just said Stamkos, who knows where he would be right now? He'd be stronger. He'd be his confidence would probably be higher because he knows how it's going to work. Gets a few games on, and then maybe a game off. So I think there should always be sort of a plan for young players like that who move into the lineup, unless they're guys like Max Domi or Dylan Larkin who or Jack Eichel, who it's pretty clear they're ready to go now.
Well, it's a nice.
He's looking down the road and he's saying, well, I already burnt a year of ELC for him, thinking he's something, and if he's not going to play, once he plays past 40 games, now it's moving into the unrestricted free agency territory. He gets a year burnt off of that. These are big implications nowadays with the way the cap is.
Yeah, and maybe maybe he can be sent to the World Juniors. I mean, that's a possibility that delays things a little bit for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, nice segue here because we were mentioning Stamkos, and Eck had written about Stamkos on his blog today. Kevin, and I know, we're not going to go into the Toronto scenario because that's going to be in July if we even get to that point. But it's curious that after John Cooper signs his extension, almost immediately Steven Stamkos, in spite of the fact that Tyler Johnson is out, that Craig Paquette is out, that that Cooper is saying they're a little weak up the middle, he's moved Stamkos to the wing.
Yeah.
And Stamkos is not very happy about it. It's almost getting to the point now where it's being expressed publicly, and it's known that he wants to play center and he's playing on the wing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in the end, you may be right. He may sign in Tampa, but optically, this does not look good.
No, I'm with you on that. I still think there's a chance that he might not re-sign there. Basically on a percentage thing, I think it's likely that he will. But I think there's a shot, and for the reason you just mentioned. Steven Stamkos has made it clear. He did so on the media tour and before when he was talking to all the, the national writers and to that he likes to play center. He's much more comfortable there. That is his position, and that he'll do what is asked of him, but that's not his first choice. Well, guess what? He's in a position where how he feels about things matters. So, and the optics, and I think that was the right word for it, don't look good, particularly after, as you said, Cooper got a new deal, and it's almost as if now Steve Yzerman said there was no connection whatsoever between that, but the way it looks, Cooper is now has job security, and so he says, well, I'm going to put you where I like you, because that's what he did. So it'll be interesting, but I do think this could play a factor. I thought all that was pushed aside because there was no playing time or position issues early in the season, but obviously now that's reared its ugly head yet again.
Yeah, Russ, no question. I was going to say there's no question that this extension sort of gave him the right to do that without having to worry about his own job. And I guess maybe Cooper felt that way because he'll justify it however he wants. Coaches will justify it however they want. But certainly now with 2 extra years riding, now he's really in the driver's seat more than Stamkos is, that's for sure.
And to me, it's a little bit surprising. I know Cooper a little bit. I've talked to him, a few times, one-on-one. And boy, is he an impressive guy. And he's very smart. To me, this almost seems a little bit out of character. Like he's such a good communicator that, I see him as the type of guy that would bring Stamkos in the behind closed doors and say, okay, Steve, what do we need to do to get this team rolling again? Like that's the way the relationship I would expect him to have with his captain. So to me, it's a little bit surprising that it's kind of come down to this, because it isn't like one of those things around the league where folks are going, wow, you got to side with Cooper. I mean, everyone knows Stamkos should be a winger. Like nobody's saying that around. Like everybody's going, I wonder why he likes him on the wing, because he seems to be a natural center, and he is like you can't argue with the success that Stamkos has had at center. It's not like he's underachieved in that role. So all of that is just surprising, and it is perplexing that we are in this situation in a season in which Steve Stamkos gets to make a decision whether he wants to spend the rest of his career in Tampa.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Russ.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
The NHL Board of Governors meeting is starting in Pebble Beach today, I believe, and a number of things are going to be discussed. One of them is the progress and just sort of checking in on the expansion scenario. Don't think that there's going to be any kind of announcements. I know that I heard over the weekend that there's going to be a review of the compensation for coaches, and that the league may decide to eliminate that whole approach beginning on January 1st. Kevin, I mean, I thought it was a bad idea in the first place, but I think it's really inherently unfair to teams like Edmonton and to teams like Toronto Boston, where Chiarelli, Edmonton had to surrender a third-round pick for him. The Leafs had to surrender a third-round pick for Babcock, for Lamoriello. Columbus had to surrender a second-round pick for John Tortorella. If they overturn this, those teams, according to what I have heard, are not going to get those picks back. It's not going to be retroactive. So, what do you think of that? Because I think it's.
Well, I agree with you on that. To me, that does seem unfair. But I guess this is at the point where we, quote first John F. Kennedy and then Jimmy Carter. Life is unfair. And you just gotta live with it. But I think it's the right move to get rid of it. I think everybody agrees with that. And it's just curious to me that it's ownership making this decision. I mean, ultimately they make all decisions, but the GMs should have had this cleared. I know Commissioner Gary Bettman was not in favor of this from the beginning. He didn't like it. And the one thing about Gary Bettman I've known from covering him for 2 decades is he has definite opinions on how things should be done, and there's always a propriety and kind of a fairness thing involved in his thinking. He thinks like a lawyer. Anybody who's ever read his briefs when he has to serve as an arbiter from disputes, or when the players have appealed, you forget he's was a big time lawyer, and he really is a big time lawyer, and he didn't like this, from the beginning, as far as I remember. So, it is going to get done, from what I hear as well. And with regard to other news out of that, the only reason that I didn't go to the meeting is because they weren't going to resolve expansion. Otherwise, I would be there. So I don't think they expect much out of that. I expect there'll just sort of be an update about where they are in the process. But the one thing I want to bring up about expansion, and it's this: like I keep reading all these things about is this a bad sign for expansion, that the fact that it's not moving as quickly as everybody wants it to. I mean, we're talking over $1 billion here. Do we really believe the league is not going to add these 2 teams and bring $1 billion? That's over $30 million per owner. Even if you kept $100 million, so that in the league coffers for administrative purposes and all this, every owner is going to get $30 million. You're just not going to be able to convince me that they're not going to do this at some point, just because it's going to be. And here's the other thing: Gary Bettman said at least $500 million. Like, it could be $550,
right,
or whatever. So we are talking so much money that all of the things that's being written about, well, they may only take one. I'm just not buying it. They're going to take 2 teams at some point.
Yeah, Russ, I'm getting the feel that, if there's a delay here, because we know that the NHL wants to expand in the West. They want to expand 2 teams in the West. I almost get the feeling that they're waiting for Seattle to get all their ducks in a row, so they can expand Las Vegas and Seattle, and that Quebec would be left open for a team that has to move out for financial reasons, like maybe Carolina, if that has to happen. But I just don't get the feeling they want to expand one in the East, one in the West. It doesn't solve their problem geographically.
they're going to have to realign, and I think they know that. And
Yeah.
I just think, I've had league officials say privately, don't get hung up on alignment because we're not afraid to realign. So don't, and I've been warned on that a couple of times by people who matter, that don't get hung up on that because it's a matter of getting the right teams. Yeah, would it have been better if it was two Western? If it was Seattle, for sure it would have been easier. But when it comes to it, hockey's going to work in Quebec City, and so that at some point they're getting a franchise. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I say the same thing about them I said about Winnipeg. Everybody who mattered knew that Winnipeg was going to get a team at some point, but it was going to get a team when Gary Bettman thought it was best for the league, and the same is true for Quebec.
Yeah, I think the holdup is just basically that with Florida now, they're going to sign this deal tomorrow to lock them up for 7 or 8 years in a deal with the city. So based on that, even though they'll be an out, we don't know how many years that is. So that'll be settled for a while. Then they're going to move to Arizona and get that thing settled, I guess, with the Suns. Then I think is when the other talk will start picking up again, because then nobody will be able to say, well, you've got these two trouble franchises in these cities that are having problems. Now, Carolina could still end up being one, but for the moment they're not. And I think then that's when they'll do it. I think they're trying to get their ducks in a row first.
Yeah, apparently there's a little bit of a quid pro quo with the Florida deal. They'll get an all-star game before, I think I read it was 2023. So, you would think that if they're guaranteeing them that the team would be safe at least until then. Wanted to touch on one other thing. It was funny because about 2.5 months ago we were all sitting at the press box of the First Niagara Center watching an attorney quit. Having to do with the whole Patrick Kane situation, which a lot of people have forgotten about. And now the only thing coming up with Patrick Kane is that he scored in 22 straight games. Kevin, I'm a little surprised that all the distraction that happened through training camp, through early in the season before this was resolved, really didn't affect him, and he's just hopping on, going on all 8 cylinders right now.
Well, I think it actually not only didn't affect him, I think it motivated him. The sense I have is that he believed he was innocent of those charges, and he has taken that, and he's used that as motivation, and he's played the best hockey of his career. In fact, he's sort of playing like I've always thought his numbers were not as high as they should be given the talent he was surrounded with. Now he's always scored in big goals at big times, but he didn't have gaudy numbers, and this is the first season where this has been Gretzky-like in my opinion, especially given the low scoring nature of the league right now. So I think he used this as motivation. He was going to show everybody that, look, I'm innocent of this, and I didn't do anything wrong. That's what he has said all along. And the decision by local law enforcement was they didn't see any reason to charge him with a crime, and here he is playing at the highest level of his career. It's really been amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. He beat Bobby Hull's record. I still give a lot of credit to Artemi Panarin too, because for whatever reason, I think that gave him this extra spark and extra gear, too. It's not like Patrick Kane was ever hurting for points, like you said, or anything like that. But sometimes it does take another line mate to sort of come in and to make you better. And I think, in a way, Panarin has made him better. I mean, this kid's a point a game as a rookie. He might be the Calder leader at the moment. And, none of us were talking about him preseason. Stan Bowman certainly knew something, or he wouldn't have signed him. But I don't even think Stan Bowman would have thought it would have worked out this well. No way.
Some interesting things happening in relation to the upcoming World Juniors in Helsinki. I wanted to touch on that last thing. First, Russ, we've been going back and forth on the whole Leaf situation with Kasperi Kapanen and William Nylander. Nylander's leading the AHL in scoring right now. Apparently, the Swedish Hockey Federation touched base with the NHL last week, requesting that all the players that they wanted who are 19 years old and not in the NHL, Shillington, Adrian Kempe from the Kings, and Nylander be released so they could play for Sweden in the World Juniors. It broke in a Swedish newspaper, and a couple days later, Lou Lamoriello said, well, we think it might be a good thing, but we haven't decided yet. And he's sort of like, it's like, and Kevin, the impression I get is they're not going until I say they're going.
Well, that's Lou. That's how Lou runs his business. It's in Lou we trust, and that was so. When I read that was so Lou Lamoriello. It's incredible, and you know what? He will make that decision based on what he thinks is best for the Maple Leafs' interest. He's not working for the Swedish Federation, is what he would tell you, or the National Hockey League. He works for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and if he thinks they would benefit from that, he'll send them. If he thinks they're better off down in the AHL, they ain't going. That's
yeah, but he's going to send them. He's sending them.
Yeah,
he will. But
yeah, I mean, the general impression is he's sending them, but
right.
But it's just it's ironic that these, and it came out again on the weekend that another Swedish newspaper said that Forsberg said that the league is told that the Leafs will release Nylander, and he still hasn't made the decision. Another interesting note, this is not all Leaf talk, but it was just because this player was expected to be named to the to Team USA's roster, Jeremy Bracco, the Leafs' second-round pick, and I believe the list came out this morning, and he was not on there, Russ. Now the thing is, and like we discussed, he left Boston College and went to the OHL, and I get the impression that maybe USA Hockey was not exactly enthralled with that decision.
I don't think it's as much that. I mean, people like to always really look into that. But I don't think it's as much that as it worries me that they're looking for too many role players. So, and the fact that they're inviting DeBrincat means, well, we don't want too many small guys. So now we're not going to have Bracco on this team because we need another 6'5" guy to sort of grind it out. And so that's the worry for me. And because there's no reason for Jeremy Bracco to not be invited to camp. None. He's played with all these top-notch guys. He's made them better in games. He's scored big points, big goals. He's got medals himself. It's just a little silly, but this is what goes on sometimes when you're constructing a roster. And I just, like I said, when I see the full roster, I'll certainly comment about it. But that's what this sort of reminds me of. Now, I'm happy to bring Katz on there because he definitely deserves it. He's leading the OHL in scoring, right? He should be on there. But that doesn't mean Bracco shouldn't be either. Like, when are we going to stop worrying about is our team too big or too small? If you guys are good, you guys are good. That's what my feeling is.
Yeah, I agree. We do tend to worry about, and it's all based on playing Canada. Like, the size, when they're adding size, it's just one game.
Right.
We play Canada, we want some bigger guys. And I agree, that's probably what that's based on.
And Canada, especially on defense, went with mostly 19-year-olds. Other than Jacob Chikrin, who's 17, I think they chose 2 18-year-olds, and the rest of the picks were 19 years old. But over the weekend, one of their defensive invitees, Jake Wallman of Providence College, suffered a separated shoulder. And he's an interesting story because he had dual citizenship, and he was ruled ineligible to play for Team USA, so he went to play for Team Canada. They chose him, then he got hurt, so neither one of them get him. So
it's a shame for the kid. It's still not a guarantee that Chikrin makes it either because it's really hard for a young defenseman to make that team, especially on Canada. Now, we saw younger guys make it for the U.S. When a younger guy makes it for Canada, they've got to be a real contributor, like, instantly, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah, and, everybody thinks that he's going to be a top 3 or 4 pick in the draft.
Well, he will be. I mean,
But we'll see. But well, guys, great show as always. I'm sure Eck will be back tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.
Yeah, he will. But
I mean, the general impression is he's sending them, but
right.
But it's just it's ironic that these, and it came out again on the weekend that another Swedish newspaper said that Forsberg said that the league is told that the Leafs will release Nylander, and he still hasn't made the decision. Another interesting note. This is not all Leaf talk, but it was just because this player was expected to be named to the to Team USA's roster. Jeremy Bracco, the Leafs' second-round pick, and I believe the list came out this morning, and he was not on there, Russ. Now the thing is, and like we discussed, he left Boston College and went to the OHL, and I get the impression that maybe USA Hockey was not exactly enthralled with that decision.
I don't think it's as much that. I mean, people like to always really look into that, but I don't think it's as much that as it worries me that they're looking for too many role players. So, and the fact that they're inviting DeBrincat means, well, we don't want too many small guys, so now we're not going to have Bracco on this team because we need another 6'5" guy to sort of grind it out. And so that's the worry for me. And because there's no reason for Jeremy Bracco to not be invited to camp. None. He's played with all these top-notch guys. He's made them better in games. He's scored big points, big goals. He's got medals himself. It's just a little silly, but this is what goes on sometimes when you're constructing a roster. And I just, like I said, when I see the full roster, I'll certainly comment about it. But that's what this sort of reminds me of. Now, I'm happy DeBrincat's on there because he definitely deserves it. He's leading the OHL in scoring, right? He should be on there. But that doesn't mean Bracco shouldn't be either. Like, when are we going to stop worrying about is our team too big or too small? If your guys are good, your guys are good. That's what my feeling is.
Yeah, I agree. We do tend to worry about, and it's all based on playing Canada. Like, the size, when they're adding size, it's just one game.
Right.
We play Canada, we want some bigger guys. And I agree, that's probably what that's based on.
And Canada, especially on defense, went with mostly 19-year-olds. Other than Jacob Chikrin, who's 17, I think they chose 2 18-year-olds, and the rest of the picks were 19 years old. But over the weekend, one of their defensive invitees, Jake Wallman of Providence College, suffered a separated shoulder. And he's an interesting story because he had dual citizenship, and he was ruled ineligible to play for Team USA, so he went to play for Team Canada. They chose him, then he got hurt, so neither one of them get him. So
it's a shame for the kid. It's still not a guarantee that Chikrin makes it either, because it's really hard for a young defenseman to make that team, especially on Canada. Now, we saw younger guys make it for the U.S. When a younger guy makes it for Canada, they've got to be a real contributor, like, instantly, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah, and, everybody thinks that he's going to be a top 3 or 4 pick in the draft.
Well, he will be. I mean,
But we'll see. But well, guys, great show as always. I'm sure Eck will be back tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.